All right, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. Now, this is where the f***ery ensues. The Democratic establishment is saying this is Biden's best week ever. You've got dark Brandon memes floating around the internet. People are hyped on Joe Biden right now. I mean, he seems like he's having a good week. And part of that good week, just so weird to say, even though it's like kind of half true. Democrats pass a major climate, health, and tax bill. Here's what's in it. This girl has a really cool name, Deepa Shivaram. I need some more time at the Buddha Center so I can get those names knocked out. Senate Democrats, after weeks of negotiations, received the core of their election year agenda after passing a spending bill which would attempt to tackle climate change, the high cost of prescription drugs, and lower the deficit by roughly $300 billion. Late Saturday night into Sunday morning, senators voted on amendments to Democrats' major spending bill that tackles healthcare, climate change, and taxes. The legislation was passed through the budget reconciliation process, which means all 50 Democrats and one tiebreaker vote by Vice President Kamala Harris were needed. Since none of the 50 Republican senators voted for the bill, it also restricts the measures in the bill to those that directly change federal spending and revenue. All right, tackling climate change. Personally, right now, I don't think that climate change is a hoax or whatever, but I feel like it's being used at this point to where, just like everything else, right? Whether it's racism or the word groomer or hate speech or misinformation or disinformation or recession, right? This is the part in 1984 where they show how when you change the word meaning of words, they no longer have any value. Climate change as a phrase has very little value now. Racism as a phrase, as in the way that it's historically been used, had value. It had weight. It meant something. It means less today than it did 10 years ago. Same with climate change. Same with the word groomer now. The Republicans beat that to death. The word patriot doesn't mean that much anymore. So we're in this process now of just hollowing out words that we want to beat to death to serve our own agendas, and climate change is unfortunately one of those. Whereas I think there's a lot we can do for the environment as a whole. We could do a lot about that, and we could focus on these things, especially focus on tangible things. But this whole climate change rhetoric has just gotten to me. It's just so exhausting to me. You're calling things like this is called the Inflation Reduction Act. It doesn't impact inflation, right? So that doesn't make any sense. It's frustrating to me. More than $300 billion would be invested in energy and climate reform, the largest federal clean energy investment in U.S. history. The bill is supported by many environmental and climate activists, but is short of the $555 billion that Democrats had originally called for, which I'm fine with. If you have a plan, maybe you should only get $100 billion at the front and prove you're going to do something with it, and then maybe you can get some more. You can't just assume that you're going to be effective, because the government is not very effective at all. This portion of the bill takes on transportation and electricity generation, and it includes $60 billion for growing renewable energy infrastructure and manufacturing like solar panels and wind turbines, which is fine, because at the end of the day, the government does need to build out that infrastructure for charging stations, renewables, which are going to be a vital part of this. Between renewables and nuclear, that's the direction we need to go into, especially for things like electricity. We can do that. We can make that happen. It's very doable with our current technology, not to mention the technology increases we're going to have in the future. It also includes several tax credits for individuals on things like electric vehicles and making homes more energy efficient. Making homes more energy efficient, we'll see how that goes. I think that's going to matter most, not so much in individual homes, but in things like condos, apartments, things like that, where you get to actually can get some probably some tax breaks for putting in more efficient AC windows, things like that. The tax credits for individuals on electric vehicles. Here's my thing with that. For a long time it was about that, right? Anything you can do to incentivize people. It's like, hey, you're going to pay less taxes because you do this thing that's mutually beneficial for kind of everyone. I see, but I think all that's going to do is drive demand up on some of those EVs that we're already in a shortage of, right? Like, I just got a notification on my phone because I ordered an F-150, not an electric one, but an F-150. Google knows that. They have a notification saying, hey, Ford is increasing the price. You have to pay, $6,000 or $7,000 over sticker to get the Ford Lightning F-150. It's because there's a chip shortage. It's hard to manufacture these things. There's a lot of things that they've gotten and it's really challenging for them to put these things together. So right now you're seeing prices increase already, and then you're going to increase demand on an already limited market because of the things that we're trying to sort out with this chips bill. So it's like you kind of put the cart before the horse here, and I don't really think that tax credits for EVs were the most valuable use of funds, in my opinion. I think the market's already there. I think people want them. If you're down to spend $70,000 on a car, then a Tesla is a great option, or a Porsche electric car. Like a lot of these electric cars, they're doing the right thing for the market. market and making higher end electric cars. You can also go Prius, baby. Toyota Prius is a great car, right? If you were going to do something more economical. I just don't think that makes the most sense in the world. I think there was a better place to put that money, but that is what it is. That's just my opinion. The bill would, according to Democrats, lower greenhouse gas emissions by 40% based on 2005 levels by the end of the decade, which is short of the 50% goal Biden had aimed for. All right, lowering the cost of prescription drugs. Now, this is where the ensues. Now, anytime we talk about something that has to do with the pharmaceutical industry or the military, you know you're about to get f***ed. So let's listen to how convoluted and ridiculous this is. On health reforms, the bill takes on making prescription drugs more affordable, but there are some limits. The bill includes a historic measure that allows the federal health secretary to negotiate the prices of certain expensive drugs each year for Medicare. So now Medicare can negotiate with certain expensive drugs, the drugs that big pharma allows them to negotiate with them over. Read between the lines there and say, big pharma said we could negotiate with them about these drugs. That's what happened. It wasn't demands. It wasn't, we're going to do this. It was, which drugs would you be okay with us negotiating the price of? Getting f***ed. There's number one. But this won't impact every prescription drug or every patient. Of course it won't. And it won't take effect quickly. The negotiations will take effect for 10 drugs covered by Medicare in 2026, increasing to 20 drugs in 2029. Are you f***ing serious? Wow. That is the biggest pile of nothing I've ever seen in my life. So that's the second one. That's the second way you're getting right there. There's nothing there. The portion of the bill that tried to cap at $35 per month the price of insulin, a drug that is incredibly expensive in the US compared to other countries, was ruled out of order by the Senate parliamentarian who ruled the cap could apply on Medicare, a government program, but not on private insurance. So Democrats split the measure between Medicare and private insurance, but Republicans ultimately blocked the measure for private insurance. So insulin, which costs pennies to make, they were going to cap that at $35 per month, and they can for Medicare, but they can't for private insurance. So you still get to pay. And, insurance is only going to cover so much. Maybe if you have a $10,000 deductible, you have to meet that within the year. So maybe you get a few months of insulin covered by your healthcare provider. But no, greed is good, baby. Greed is good. That's number 3, a fake good thing that's really actually bullshit. The parliamentarian also ruled that a measure that was in the bill to force drug companies to offer rebates of prescription prices outpaced inflation was not totally in line with the rules for budget reconciliation. She said that it could apply to Medicare patients, but not those with private insurance. The bill puts a cap of $2,000 on out-of-pocket prescription drug costs for people on Medicare effective in 2025. Again, why 2025? Why 3 more years? That makes no sense. There's also a 3-year extension on healthcare subsidies in the Affordable Care Act, originally passed in a pandemic relief bill last year, estimated by the government to have kept premiums at $10 per month or lower for the vast majority of people covered through the Federal Health Insurance Exchange. That helped millions of people avoid spikes in healthcare costs. Okay, tax reform. The legislation creates a 15% minimum tax for corporations making $1 billion or more in income, bringing in more than $300 billion in revenue. A portion that got cut, though, is one that narrowed the carried interest tax loophole. Arizona's Kyrsten Sinema agreed to sign onto the bill if the measure, which would have changed the way private equity income is taxed, was cut. Democrats said it would have brought in $14 billion in revenue. So let's talk about the carried interest loophole real quick. And Matt Taibbi, this is something that we need to know, guys. We're going to get a little education today. Matt Taibbi is somebody I really trust when it comes to finance. He kind of came up as a journalist. He's already a journalist, but he really cut his teeth in the 2008 financial crisis, which taught us all a lot about the reality of the world we live in. It says, in one of the longest running political comedies in America, a hated tax break once again survives at the last minute after a huge coalition of politicians promised to kill it. The so-called carried interest tax loophole allows private equity execs, once called leveraged buyout artists, to pay most taxes as long-term capital gains as opposed to ordinary income, a main route by which billionaires can pay lower tax rates than teachers or construction workers. Titans like Steven Schwartzman of Blackstone, whose 2021 income was over $1 billion, including $941.6 million in Blackstone's dividends, was likely taxed at the lower rate, can cut their tax bills roughly in half. You can cut your tax bill in half. Schwartzman, who once spent $5 million hiring Rod Stewart to play his birthday party, endured himself to the ordinary folk in 2010 when he said the potential end of the break was like Hitler invading Poland. Wow. Law professor Victor Fleisch in 2015 estimated that closing the loophole will generate $180 billion over 10 years, and politicians have promised to do it at least half a dozen times this generation. Barack Obama first proposed a change in 2009. did so again in 2010, 2011, and 2012. Then Hillary Clinton promised to end it as a candidate in 2016. Donald Trump said executives were getting away with murder as president did actually limit the access to the exemption a little. Joe Biden also proposed doing away with it, and the loophole finally seemed to be all but dead this week. As recently as Wednesday, Private Equity News reported that it was on the chopping block thanks to the insertion in the Inflation Reduction Act. But it was taken out at the last minute, reportedly at the cost of earning Arizona Senator Kyrsten Sinema's support for the bill. Dennis Kelleher of Better Markets calls carried interest the billionaire's tax loophole a cockroach because it can't be killed. While another financial reform activist I called referenced an iconic American cartoon sequence saying there was always people who believe Charlie Brown will really kick the football this time. I love Matt Taibbi so much. So Kyrsten Sinema looked around Scottsdale and said, you know what? Somebody needs to stand up for the private equity bros. And when I look at this, it makes me feel angry. Anyways, moving on. Instead, a 1% excise tax on stock buybacks was introduced, and it could bring in roughly 5 times as much revenue as the carried interest measure. However, it wouldn't take effect until next year, raising predictions of a rush of buybacks by some companies before 2023 rolls around. Interesting. I don't mind that. I think that makes sense. A 1% excise tax on buybacks. I mean, buybacks I don't think should be illegal. They're great for shareholder value, and a lot of people who hold those shares are people like me without a ton of money that are just, trying to save and be smart. So yeah, I look at, even when I analyzing different stocks, like I want to see a company that's created enough revenue to buy back some of their stock, which is better for the investors. But at the same time, I totally get that 1% excise tax because, well, I also wish they could be barred from using government money to buy back stocks. I don't mind if you do it with your own money, do whatever you want with your own money, company. But when you're using bailout money, like the airlines and the banks, that's a major portion of the bill that isn't included due to the opposition from West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin is extending the child tax credit. Manchin expressed last year that the cost to extend the credit was too high, but progressives, including Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders, have continued to push for its inclusion in the bill. That is our Inflation Reduction Act. Overall thoughts. Here's my thing. Whatever. It's fine. Not the worst thing in the world. I don't cheer for or endorse or support increasing government revenue. Okay? That's where I'm at. I do, however, want to see the carried interest tax loophole closed because the people that are benefiting from that are people that are adding no value. People are like, well, Jeff Bezos made a thing and Elon Musk. No one gives a about Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk. They should both be billionaires. Private equity douchebags, on the other hand, add zero value, a little sprinkle of value. And they have so much leverage. So what I would want to see when people make tax reform propositions like this, right? Where you're putting that 15% tax on what companies report to their investors, right? As opposed to what they're reporting to the IRS. So you're going to have a 15% minimum tax, which is lower than the tax rate of 21%. I think that's good, right? But I'm saying, okay, well, you're increasing revenue via taxing businesses, taxing the super wealthy, all that stuff. How about we do that? And whatever the revenue difference is there within let's say 10 million or 100 million and above, whatever that is, whatever that generates for you in that 15% business tax, how about you balance it out by creating tax breaks for people who make, I don't know, $100,000 and less? How about we say anybody who makes less than $100,000 a year pays zero in taxes, and somehow we keep government revenue level? That's what I'd like to see. That makes sense to me because I'm not going to cheer for increasing government revenue for the sake of increasing government revenue. They're not great at capital allocation. What I would like to see is, hey, these hedge fund are going to actually get taxed at 30%. But if you own a small business, you work a job, you make $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, you're actually going to get taxed zero. Maybe your state can tax you for whatever reason because you live there and that's the other things that have to happen there. But federally, you don't. The big goose egg for us because you're already paying sales tax, you're doing these other things. And then maybe shifting in, maybe that forces creativity into shifting into maybe a more of a consumption tax type of situation. But that's where I'm at. All this stuff gets talked about with the rich, but most of us aren't. So how about we have a conversation that leads to tax cuts for the working class? That stimulates the economy as well. I mean, you saw what happened when everybody got $1,200. Just think about if all those people don't pay taxes, federal taxes. So they get what? Their revenue, their income is now increased by 15%. 20%, depending. I know it's not the actual tax rate, but when you write some shit off, I don't know. I think that would be a beautiful stimulus and be great for the real Americans. But that's just me. That is just me. I don't really feel good rooting for increasing government revenue, especially whenever we take $60 billion and just shit it into Ukraine. I want to share with you what it takes to create this kind of content. I have to sift through piles and piles of bullshit from political ideologues that are completely ridiculous and try and find the truth. I've got to go from the left to the right to the center, all over the place. It's exhausting. I'm losing my fucking mind. But one thing you can do to help me out and help my mental health is subscribe to this channel. Turn on post notifications, like this video, leave a comment, just something, please. I'm losing my shit and you're the only one that can help me. Subscribe to the channel.